Hey guys, Dr. Ben here, F8 Well Centers. Let's talk about diet and, should you cut out carbs? Should you cut out grains? Should you cut out sugar? And if that's going to be enough to truly change your metabolic state, to reverse your insulin resistance, to reverse your prediabetes, diabetes, all of those things, and what some of the latest research is showing. So welcome everybody. We're going to get in depth into what this research is showing and why it's not just changing your diet that is going to be so beneficial for obesity, weight loss, diabetes prevention, diabetes reversal, all of those things. So welcome. Pop down below where you guys are watching from. We get people all over the country, all over the world, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, whatever source you're at. Let us know where you're watching from and what you have done lately. Let us know what you've done as far as, hey, I've quit drinking my calories. I am no longer eating grains, or I've gone keto or paleo or Vigo, or now I'm eating more grains, or whatever you're doing. And if you're having any success, hey Cindy there in Albuquerque. So let's get into this research. So this was recently published and they were using mice for this study. But again, it's a really good, hey Marla, it's a really good tool because we can run a lot of mice through and do it very quickly because their metabolic state is going to be faster and reproducing faster than we do. So here's what the research was looking at. They said, okay, what happens when we give these mice a lot of sugar, a lot of high, basically standard American diet. Hey Lorraine, good to see you. Basically a standard American diet, high processed food. There's a lot of research, I've been talking about that lately on the processed food side. So let's give these mice this standard American diet. Hey Tracy, good to see you there in Ipswich. So they gave these mice the standard American diet for 4 weeks, and they tracked their microbiome. So what was going on in their gut? Hey there in Norway, good to see you. So what was going on in these mice gut as they increased basically that sugar content a lot? And what we saw with this study was that it wasn't just, oh, the blood sugar started going up, that, oh, we're tracking with this continuous glucose monitor now, and I'm able to see it all day long what that blood sugar is doing. It wasn't just the blood sugar that was the issue, it was the microbiome that started changing. And even in 4 weeks for these mice, it was a significant difference. And they called it this filamentous bacteria, these longer fibers of bacteria started going down in the numbers that there are. And it started to change this overall balance in the microbiome. And as that happened, stick with me here, as that happened, these Th17, which is, if you recognize that there's different TH molecules in the body, and these are going to be inflammatory markers. These started changing, and they led to more of this metabolic syndrome, led to more of this prediabetes, insulin resistance, all of this, more than just that blood sugar going up and just that insulin spiking up. And so it was the microbiome that changed in these mice that really led to this metabolic syndrome and this insulin resistance and all of this blood sugar issue. It wasn't so much just blood sugar spike. It actually changed the gut, and that led to much of this inflammatory process. And what we know is a big driver of insulin resistance. So, and this happened in only 4 weeks. What was really interesting was then that they reversed it, and they started giving these mice their normal wild mice diet, and what they saw was that some of the mice actually got better and they reversed their insulin resistance and their metabolic syndrome, but there was a pretty high percentage of them that did not. And the reason was because their microbiome did not go back to where it was supposed to be. And so it wasn't just, hey, let's take out grains and now these mice, now we're keeping their blood sugar totally steady, but it did not reverse the insulin resistance. It did not reverse the metabolic syndrome. And that is where we have to dig into that microbiome. Hey, Jessica, what probiotics do you recommend? Brittany, go ahead and put a link to the Well Store there. And the number two, probiotic number two, is a great place to start on that one. So here's what we're looking at is it wasn't enough just to go grain free, just to go sugar free, any of those things for many of these mice, because their microbiome had altered so much. And just by going in and taking some of those foods out was not enough. You have to dig deep and you've got to change that microbiome. You've got to do kill off. We don't just take a probiotic, Jessica. So that's what I'm gonna recommend you here, not just going to buy that probiotic, because here's the deal. Just by taking good bacteria doesn't change, and didn't change in that study either. We have to go in and we actually have to kill off bad stuff, because here's what happens. Good stuff goes down, bad stuff goes up. Taking some good stuff does a little of this. But until you do this, knock down the bad stuff and then bring up the good stuff, you're not going to see that massive change like you want to and like you need to in the gut. And so that's the biggest thing that I'm looking at is how can you go about making this massive change in the microbiome? Because that, we know there was another study where they did a fecal transplant. So a fecal transplant is usually from healthy person to sick person, like with C. diff and some of that. I'll get to that in a second, Jessica. And so how do we get that good stuff into the person with the bad stuff? But this one they took from one person, put it into this one, and from that other person, put it into that one. And so they basically flip-flopped their microbiome. And what also changed besides their microbiome, their belt size. They actually had a weight difference. One went up and one went down. So the person that was more overweight actually lost weight when they changed their microbiome from a fecal transplant. And then the other way, it went, the other person actually gained weight when they changed their microbiome. So here we go, Jessica, and everybody else out there, is you've got to kill off first. My favorite is the Oregano Max. It's an oil of oregano, but it's time released. It's not in a little gel cap. It's not in a dropper, and it's time released. It's going to get down into that gut, into that large intestine, and kill off a lot of the bad stuff. You can also use, we have the intestinal repair as well. Brittany, you can put that on there, and that has some good kill off as well. So we want to knock it down, run through a bottle of that. The Oregano Max we'll do three times a day with people. Knock that down and then build it back up. And you may need to go through that 2 or 3 times to really get that microbiome balanced out. So remember, this wasn't from taking antibiotics. This wasn't from taking some type of NSAIDs or eating a bunch of GMO foods with Roundup on it, killing off your good bacteria. This was just from eating a standard American diet. So standard American diet, high sugar, high processed food changes your microbiome. Absolutely, 100%, hands down. You can't argue this fact. Your microbiome, if you're eating the standard American diet, or if you ever did eat that way, your microbiome has changed. Maybe changed forever. You've got to keep working at it. It may never be as good as it was once, but you've got to keep working at it. I took antibiotics for 3 months one time because I had 2 bullseye tick bites, and I'm like, I'm not getting Lyme disease symptoms. So I did 3 months of antibiotics, knocked it down, never had symptoms, thankfully. And as long as I keep my body strong, I probably won't have those symptoms. But here's the deal, guys. You've got to take a step back, look at your diet. Yes, you have to get rid of sugar. You have to get rid of grains. You have to balance out your blood sugar day in and day out. And yet, if your microbiome is not where it needs to be, you will not be as healthy as you possibly can. So if you don't know what your microbiome is doing, if you need help, if you need support, send us a DM, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Facebook. Get a hold of us and we can get through. Hey, David, sugar is poison. Absolutely. And we can get through running a blood panel. We can drop ship this anywhere in the US, and we can sit down and go over exactly what is going on in that blood work and show you what may be going on with that microbiome out of balance, all of these issues. And then one of my F8 doctors can review this with you and work one-on-one with you to get your life back. So super excited. This information coming out, this research is really profound, and it just reiterates that you can go off the wagon and you can do bad things and then come back on the wagon and do better, and yet for a lot of people, that's not going to be enough. Just stopping your sugar intake is not going to be enough. You have already changed your microbiome. Chrissy, would the blood work show yeast overgrowth? Yes, there's specific markers that we look for in that blood work to see, is the bacterial imbalance, is there viral, yeast, all these different things. We can tell a lot of different things from that blood work. How many grams of carbs per day is ideal per body weight? Hey, Zach, get this. So, I'm so proud of my wife. She just had a 11 millimeter kidney stone. If anyone's had kidney stones before, that is massive. And she pushed it all the way from her kidney down to the to right at the bladder junction, and it probably just wasn't going to go through there. But anyway, she was in the hospital. They had to break it up and get that out. And so in there, we ordered. She needed to eat a little bit before leaving. So we got some avocado, some little potatoes, some bland stuff to just make sure she was going to be okay to leave. But I was reading in that flyer in the hospital, and they said, if you're on a carbohydrate restricted diet, and Laura Lynn, carbs are not necessarily all different. I'll get into that in a minute. But if you're on a carbohydrate restricted diet, then you should probably be between 65 and 70 grams of carbs per meal. Can you imagine? I mean, here's the deal. Most people, 50 to 75 grams of carbs per day is going to be about the max that they should be at. And that much over that, you're probably having more that are going to spike up that blood sugar. So Laura Lynn, carbs are different in that some carbs for different people are going to do different things. And that's what we've seen. It's not just that carbs are different, that quinoa is different than rice, but some people can eat quinoa but can't eat rice, but then the next person, they can't eat quinoa but they can eat some rice. And so it's unique. Carbs are unique in how they affect individual people, not necessarily carbs in general. You can't throw a blanket statement on carbs of any kind that strawberries are better than blueberries or apples or worse than peaches or whatever. It's all individualized through there. So Zach, how many carbs per day? 50 to 75 grams per day of carbs is going to be a good window to sit in. But again, check your blood sugar, poke your finger, use your continuous glucose monitor, and you're going to be able to tell where you're going to be and what type of carbs you're going to be okay with. Okay, so that's going to be a big part of this. So remember, for those of you guys just jumping on, this study showed they took mice 4 weeks. They did the standard American diet with them. And what they found, it wasn't just insulin resistance and their blood sugar going up and some of that. It was that the microbiome started changing just from that standard American diet, just from increasing these carbs, sugars, refined processed foods, all of that. And that change in the microbiome led to this massive shift in Th17, an inflammatory part. Yeah, Zach, that's a tiny amount of carbs compared to the average plate of food. Yeah, it absolutely is. And yet, go and read Dr. Perlmutter's work. He's done tons of research, reviewed tons of research, Grain Brain, bunch of different things out there, and this is what we've seen with our patients as well. But again, it's unique. Some people could get 100, 125 and keep their blood sugar 85 to 110 all day long, and their weight doesn't go up, and they feel good and they don't have any inflammation. So. So the KE, I wish those continuous glucose monitors were covered by insurance, even if it were long enough to find out what foods our bodies react to. Diet is not a one size fits all. Yep, so continuous glucose monitor right here. This is every one of our new patients that we work with, they get a 3-month supply included in our care. And so with that, you figure out so many different things. You get to see so many imbalances and figure out. So what did I find? This weekend was interesting. I ate half a peach in Colorado here. It's peach season. If you haven't had Colorado peaches, I'd rival them against almost anybody's peaches out there. No offense, Georgia people. So I had half a peach and some yogurt with it, and I still hit well over 135 on just that half a peach, where I can do half an apple and be totally fine. So it really depends on that person and which fruits that you're using with those. And awesome. So that's it's great. It's a tool that we use all the time. For a few $100s, we're able to get a 3-month supply of that continuous glucose monitor versus they're a couple $1,000s for it covered by insurance. What are your thoughts on saliva hormone tests? This candy saliva hormone tests, they're great. They're kind of the gold standard for hormone tests. It depends on what you're doing. We run hormones in the blood work, but we're not prescribing medication, creams, things like that based off of those. We're looking for, hey, is your testosterone tanked? Is your estrogen high or low? And we're looking for generalities and then getting to the why. We're not prescribing specific doses. If you're getting a specific dosage, then yes, you probably need to do the saliva. Chrissy, peaches are not good for me either. Spike City. You know what? Funny, Chrissy. Tell me what your watermelon did. So watermelon is like the craziest fruit. It must just be like sugar water. People will hit 180, 190 when they do watermelon. So. It's really, really interesting. So here's the deal. It's not just about sugar. It's not just about grains. It's about your gut and what eating excess of those actually does to your microbiome. So even if you do go on a diet, even if you do make these massive changes, but you don't truly fix your microbiome, change that gut, change that flora, you may not see the weight loss. You may not see that insulin resistance like you need to. So, here we go. Guys, just do it. Be consistent. I'd rather you be 90% all the time rather than 100% sometimes and 0% other times. Stay consistent. You have the ability to give your body the best possible strength and health and well-being and brain function and everything possible. So I'm excited for you guys. Take massive action. Move your feet today. There, guys.